What it do, what it do. This is the Brothers on Books podcast, where we find great books that will give you real value and actionable steps and have fun in the process. Please reach out to us at brothersonbooks@gmail.com for any book recommendations, or if you'd like to be a guest host for a particular book you have in mind. A great review or rating on whichever platform you're listening to this would be greatly appreciated. If you can think of any friend, family member, or coworker that might like this episode, please pass it along. For the original episodes, the OGs, please visit brothersonbooks.com. And lastly, we're now on Instagram at Brothers on Books. I am Jack Allwild, and with me, as always, is Alex Allwild, my brother. Al, how you doing today?
I'm doing great, Jack. I'm in cold New York as we're recording this episode, so it's not, quite as pleasant weather-wise as the deep south as I've become accustomed to, but still very nice. How you doing?
I'm doing well. I guess when this episode releases, however, you will be in sunny Hawaii. And
Well, I don't. You say that. I saw some article that said Hawaii was going to be hit with a snowstorm, so I don't know how sunny it will be.
What, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Something about there was some volcano erupting, and now I don't know. I sent an article to the family group chat that I don't think anyone read.
Well, I guess in any case, happy holidays to the listeners. And I think the episode after this will probably do some sort of yearly review and get the books for next time. But this week we are discussing the book Into the Wild by Jon Krakauer. We discussed his book Into Thin Air, episode 6. He's an outdoorsman, and his parents were definitely academics, and he kind of broke loose from that vein of thinking and spent a lot of time as a carpenter, I think, and yeah, just, kind of wandered around doing adventures, doing cool stuff. So, yeah, what did you think after finishing this one?
Like the first one, not a particularly uplifting book, relatively somber, but I enjoyed the read. It was a very interesting, I guess we'll probably get into talking about it, but the story highlighting the main character, I guess Chris McCandless or Alexander Supertramp, however you want to call him, just kind of highlighting his life and his, I guess for lack of a better word, his odyssey through from, I guess, Atlanta to Alaska. It was very interesting. I thought it was very interesting. I think the lifestyle is very interesting. I have to say, I do sort of sometimes feel the appeal to want to just go live, away from people, more or less away from responsibility, from others, to just kind of be on your own and have to fend for yourself. I do get that appeal to want that. But at the end of the day, yeah, I think it was sort of a depressing book.
Mm-hmm.
What about you? How did you feel after it?
I guess I would start off by saying I think Krakauer is like an unbelievable storyteller. The way he weaves like other people's stories in with the main character. He goes through multiple people that are similar to Chris and their journeys to get more perspective on what Chris might have been going through. And I definitely see the appeal of going on these adventures. In fact, I think at one point, we're actually planning an Alaskan trip. Now, I don't think we would have gone and tried to live off the land, but I absolutely remember mapping out how long it would take me to drive to Alaska at one point.
66 hours from Ann Arbor.
It was some crazy amount like that. And
yeah, I remember looking at that too.
I definitely have always been drawn to Alaska for whatever reason. And then there was that show a couple years ago that started Life Below Zero. And the way they depict life, it is, somewhat enticing to try out, to try to go live off the land, live where, time doesn't really matter. and try to, yeah, have an adventure. And then another thought that I really couldn't get out of my head, and I think the author kind of was trying to, because a lot of people were saying he was unprepared,
Yeah.
stupid, and he decided to share his story of going into Alaska and doing some crazy hikes, I think with like ice picks, like up
Yeah.
a ice face.
He's trying to climb Devil's Thumb in Alaska, if people want to look that up. Um,
Yeah, so I mean that and I think the only difference is that, luck happened to be on his side.
yeah, he survived and Chris did not.
Yeah. And I also thought one of the other people we've interviewed, Alistair Humphreys, kind of struck me as a similar character that didn't want to be pegged down to like normal society and wanted to, go on these adventures. And he, biked around the world, did an adventure through the desert, rode across the Atlantic. And maybe he was just lucky to see the other side. And now he's kind of toned it down. But it seems like there's a lot of people that have this type of feeling to want to experience these adventures. Um, so yeah, those are my thoughts. But yeah, Alistair Humphreys was definitely going through my mind when I was reading this, and I'd be curious, maybe we should message him and see if he's read this and what he thinks.
It would be I think he would have an interesting take. I guess I remember I don't know if you ever saw the movie, but this was made as a movie.
Oh, okay.
Um, yeah, it was I know Kristen Stewart was in it, and then I think the guy's name is Emil Hirsch. He's a big star in like the early 2000s.
Okay.
The only reason I really remember that is I remember Dad and I went and saw this movie on a Friday night at midnight, and we were the only ones in the theater on like it would have been like 2006 or 2007. Uh, but I distinctly remember seeing this movie, and there were a couple of things. I guess I'll just say this right away. When he's talking about the end, when Chris can't ford the river when he to get out of the bush, where he then eventually starves. In the book, I think John does a much better job of explaining what the river looked like, and that it was like 100 feet wide and
Mhm.
rapid waters. In the movie, I remember thinking it just looked like a fast moving stream, and I was like, dude, like get across, like it doesn't look that bad.
Mhm.
And so I remember being like, man, that guy was stupid. Um, but I guess sort of, like what you were saying is that in the book, yeah, a lot of people were saying how unprepared he was, but I feel like John did a good job almost of going back and more or less exonerating him for the fact that where he was maybe somewhat unprepared, he was not stupid. And I don't know, did you the last I actually found this may have something to do with my background. I actually found the last chapter of the book to be the most interesting, where he was going through what
The different plants and what he might have ate that would have poisoned him, or that
poisoned him,
part.
right? Yeah,
Okay.
because also in the movie they make it look like he mixed up. They talk about the two different plants that are very similar, and in the movie they clearly show that he ate the wrong plant, and that's what
Hmm.
caused him to be sick and eventually starve. And then in the book, I feel like sort of through some you know scientific investigation, they more or less showed that it was really he was eating the wrong part of a plant that was not listed out to be poisonous. So he had no way of knowing that what he was eating was actually poisonous when it more or less was said to be okay.
Hmm.
Uh,
And
but
yep. Good.
no, finish your thought. Yeah.
Well, I was just going to say there's if someone just heard, like, maybe explain like the river aspect, like, because the river wasn't like a raging river when he crossed it in like April.
Right. Yeah. So the river when he went into the bush in April was just like I think as it's described. almost like a babbling stream when it was partially frozen over. And what happened was when you have all the snow melt, the river floods. So the river goes, I think he said like 10 to 100 times like wider and deeper. And I mean, he's describing it as, you know, strong white water rapids. For anyone that's ever, I don't know, you've never whitewater rafted, have you?
Only at the Whitewater Center in Charlotte.
Oh, right, yeah. So for anyone that's ever whitewater, I mean, if anyone's ever whitewater rafted, if you're gonna cross whitewater rapids, that is not an easy thing to do. Uh, you're not just going to go and do that. And then John sort of also said that Chris had stated that he was afraid of water. Like it didn't sound like he could really swim. So it makes sense that if the river was as wide and deep as he sort of says, because John goes back to where he died the year after.
Mhm.
And if the river looks like what he's describing, it makes total sense that he would turn around, especially because he had made it that long in the woods with really no issue. So would have no reason to believe that he couldn't make it, another month without problems.
Yeah, and
But
on top of the speed and the width of the river, it's also frigidly cold because it
right,
sounded like it
yeah,
still had the ice chunks coming down.
yeah. So you liked the other stories he told about the other young men that went into the wild.
Yes, I did. There was one guy in particular. Man, let me go through my notes real quick. There was a guy um who spent, I think it was like 10 years, and he like devoted his life to like kind of analyzing and assessing whether people could really live totally off the land, and I guess with, quote unquote comfort. And basically he concluded that this is not possible.
Yeah.
But yeah, just a lot of great stories of other men that ventured into the bush. Okay, this guy's name was Gene Rossellini. Yeah, he lived 10 years off the land and concluded people couldn't really live off the land.
Well,
So,
he was using no modern tools, right? Wasn't
yeah,
that one of the things?
correct. No tools.
I mean, that's like border. Yeah, I mean, I'm amazed he made it 10 years.
Yeah, I mean that's an eternity. I mean I mean just not having, and I don't think he was really close to people. Like he was really by himself. So from that perspective, I mean, I think most people would be, well, one would consider like addicted to other people. Like we need other people to
Yeah,
feel whole, and to go 10 years with not really a lot of contact with people, that would be tough.
I mean,
I mean, just like into thin air. I like the tangential stories of the other people, and I need to look them up. But I want to look up this Rossellini guy. There's another guy named Waterman, and then a guy named McCunn, I think.
and then there was the Everett, the guy that walked into
Yep,
the desert, Everett Rooser. I can't
yep,
pronounce his last name.
that's true.
I
Yeah, and
I think
that was in southern Utah. That was an interesting story, also.
they made it sound like his demise was maybe a little nefarious.
Yeah,
Uh, the Rossellini guy though, he came from like a political family though, I believe, correct? Do you remember?
I do not remember. Most of these guys, I feel like they have similar stories where the parents are like very, I guess, successful, and then they don't want anything to do with the parents' success, and they just, don't want to feel like they're mooching in any way. Um, I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, so I got that. I mean, I guess I mean, at one point he described like Chris feeling, I don't know, almost like ashamed that they had stuff. Uh,
Right.
yeah, and I don't know, like I think it's hard to tell. Uh, I think I would have needed to know. They didn't really. I feel like Jon didn't really describe Chris's relationship with his father in the way that I wanted to know about it, because he describes that Jon's father or Chris's father had this like second life that was hidden, right? He like had an
Yep.
entire different
Different
family,
family. Yep.
and that when he found out about this other family when he was like 20 or 21, and that's kind of when he started almost isolating himself.
Hmm.
Uh,
Yeah, and
and
it
I could
sounded like there was some overlap in like the two, like him seeing the
families,
two women, kind of.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess like I mean I guess I went on to sort of like I mean it seemed like he was wanted to call his father a hypocrite for like how he lived, but I also don't know like how his father, like I could see wanting to call your dad a hypocrite if he was like telling you to live like I guess a quote unquote morally sound life when from like a decent amount of time you were, with two women raising two families, which by most American standards would be referred to as immoral. Um, but I mean, back sort of, I mean, to your early point of isolation, I feel like even Jon sort of made it seem like from Chris's diary entries, he was tired of the isolation, and he kind of realized that for like true happiness, you need to share it with other people. I don't remember. I think that's one of the quotes he has written down at the end.
I believe, yeah, that was at the tail end of his trip when he basically seemed like he was ready to integrate with normal society.
Society, right? The conclusion he had come to. Uh, Let me see if I can find it. Uh, the conclusion he had come to more or less was that to be happy and to have happiness, you need to share it with other human beings to have a fulfilled, like I guess, a fulfilled life. Um, that was sort of my takeaway on that. But yeah, I mean, I guess he tied nicely together his own issues. I mean, he doesn't really explain what issues he had with his own dad, but he just said that he felt like his Jon was kind of calling his dad a hypocrite, and he felt like Chris was calling his dad a hypocrite, and they both went out and did these crazy adventures. And I will say I really enjoyed reading Jon talk about trying to climb up the Devil's Thumb in Alaska.
That
I
was
found
probably, I mean, in terms of like feeling part of the experience, because it was like his own experience.
experience, right? You could really get a grasp for what was, what he was fearing. And I think
And
at one point he talked about feeling like he was, his chest was like his heart was beating so hard, and his legs started cramping. And I could really like envision myself being in that situation, like almost got to imagine like you're staring death in the eye to then go down. And then he went back up, which
mhm,
just, I assumed after he talked about how he was so scared the first time, he was just going to go down, but he went
mhm.
back up.
Yeah, because he spent like, what was it, like 30 days by himself, or
It was a long time.
and he
Most,
unfortunately burned a hole in his tent, which made his tent colder at one point.
yeah,
And
yeah.
well, okay, one idea he had that I thought was so good. Um, and I mean, I don't know how helpful it really would have been if there was like a huge crevasse, but I think he said he had like curtain rods that were like 8 or 10 feet long, and he had two of them that he like put in a cross and like he attached to his back. So if he fell down a crevasse, hopefully it would like stop him from falling through. I thought that was like a really like genius idea. I mean, I don't know if it really would have supported him if he would have fallen, but I mean, at least he tried to prepare, I guess. So I thought that was a cool idea. Um, what did you think of? Because he brought up the point that Chris didn't take a map. And if he would have taken a map, that by the river, I guess I actually didn't know what he meant by this. I think he called it was a special type of map, but
Top,
basically,
I think it was a topological map.
yeah, it
I,
wasn't. I guess does that show like man-made objects
I don't
on it?
know.
Because there was basically this cable system that one could cross the river in like a basket, like a pulley system. And if he would have had one of these maps, he would have known if he would have just gone like I think it was like a mile further north, he would have found this basket that he could have just pulled himself across the river in this basket. Um, but he wanted to do it with no help.
I mean, I guess like if you're gonna the thing that yeah, that was my initial thought. But then if you're gonna say that, like, well, why? What's the cutoff for like help? Because he brought a gun, he had a machete, he had a sleeping bag. So like, what is the at what point do you cut off? Uh, do you cut yourself off from like needing help? Because he wasn't like the guy we talked about earlier that was the Rossellini guy who was using no tools. I think he talked about in the book about him spending days using stones to chop logs.
Mhm.
Chris wasn't doing that. So I
Right.
mean, I guess it's easy for us to be here now and be like, dude should have brought a map and he'd be alive.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I mean,
And then I thought John brought up another good, or at least another perspective on why maybe, because we're kind of just like, it's all conjecture on what killed them or why he brought up the point, why didn't he try to like start a forest fire? And then a plane might
yeah,
have seen him. And then he kind of said, well, he had stayed there John, that is, had stayed there a couple nights and hadn't seen any like small planes pass by. So maybe that's what was going through Chris's head, that it wouldn't have helped really. But I don't know. If I was starving, I probably would have started one anyway.
yeah. I think I probably would have as well. I mean, I guess this all comes back to the point that a lot of people, there was a decent contingent of people that said they thought he wanted to commit suicide, right? Like his goal was
Hmm.
not to come out of the bush. So
Yeah.
I feel like the
But
back or like the last, more or less the last 50 pages of the book was John kind of going through and showing why he didn't think Chris was trying, one, to commit suicide, and two, why he wasn't incompetent in living
mhm.
off the land. Which, I mean, to be fair, I think he succeeded in. Like, I don't think after reading the book, I don't think his intention was to die, and I don't think he was incompetent. Um, I don't know what your thoughts were on
Yeah,
those
I agree. But I also kind of like I can't help but like compare because like he said his favorite author was Jack London. And apparently, like I think in the beginning of the book, they talk about how much he read like Jack London stuff. And I think, well, I don't know. I can't help but think like Jack London committed suicide. I think, I might be getting that wrong,
Yeah,
but,
no, I think he did, but I think he also shot himself,
uh-huh.
and Chris would have had the opportunity to shoot himself, which
Yeah,
he didn't do.
true. I guess, and then they brought up the point that Jack London, even though he talks about all this nature stuff, was really just like a drunk and
Obese.
yeah, yeah, obese and didn't really, leave his place much. So, just I guess goes to underline, be careful on who you pick to follow and see what they're actually doing, not just what they're saying or writing.
Or I think he makes the point of sort of saying that the people Chris granted leniency to were people that he viewed as doing work in like in an interesting way. It was like writers and the people he met on the road
Hmm.
who obviously had some severe problems that he viewed as great people, but it was his father who I guess made one of these moral like indiscretions that he had trouble forgiving.
Hmm.
And I guess, I don't know, maybe it's probably harder, I would say, to forgive your father for something along those lines than someone you don't even really know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, true. I
So,
mean, it's kind of a weird, like everyone talked like he was pretty like friendly when you were around him, but like kind of just didn't have a problem being alone. Like he'd be
uh,
okay being around you for a little bit, but then you'd want to be alone. That seems to be a common trait with a lot of these people.
yeah, was it is it introvert extrovert or like the introverted extrovert? I don't know. I feel
Hmm.
like I hear in that those psychology circles that those terms thrown around a lot.
Hmm.
People that like to be social but need their alone time.
Yeah, like an outgoing introvert.
Yeah, something along
Yeah,
those lines.
yeah, or a shy extrovert, right? Um, so any other things
The,
that come to mind, or
one of the other, I guess, one of the other things that really sort of resonated with me is back to when John was talking about his own experience of uh, of climbing the Devil's Thumb. He talked about like how in his own mind, like accomplishing this was the be all end all of his life, more or less, and that after he accomplished it, he uh he went back to Boulder and continued framing houses and putting up siding, and more or less nothing in his life really changed. Even though when you're preparing for it, it uh, seems like everything's going to change.
Mhm.
And I guess that subtle that point really resonated with me. I felt exactly like that going through grad school. It's like I just remember always telling myself like, oh, once I finish grad school, like everything will be different. And then of
Mhm.
course you finish. I don't know if you felt the same way about when you completed your FSA.
I think that there has been things. I think um the point I took from that was like because he said like when he would go to the bar after he did that, and he told like some people just didn't believe that he did it, and then
Right.
others believed it, but they just didn't care
Didn't
because
care. Yeah.
everyone thinks about themselves by and large, like they're not really. So I think that's more of the thing I took from that. But yeah, I get like yeah, once you complete something, yeah, nothing's really changed. Yeah, it's a good thought.
I don't know. It's like I always felt this like in sports. Like I mean, how do you think Messi feels right now? Like I guess Messi just won the World Cup final. Something he's been trying to do for this is his fourth or fifth World Cup.
Fifth.
You know, fifth. So something he's been trying to do for like the better part of you know 16 years. And like what? What does he do now? Like it's I'm sure everyone's super excited for probably a month, and then he goes back to playing soccer.
Yeah, yeah, I definitely feel good for Messi. He was kind of living in Maradona's shadow, and now I think he'll be able to play even looser. And I guess I was expecting him to retire, but now I'm hearing that he's not going to retire from international play. So that would be, I was not expecting. I would think he would want to like just be on top with Argentina, but who knows?
I mean, do you think he could come back and play in the 26 World Cup?
Mm,
Be 39.
I would not be shocked if he was on the team.
Yeah, I actually said that as well, but I
Um,
don't feel like he'll be playing
right,
at least a lot.
but
I don't know. I mean, it seems like these guys can, play longer with, the way people can take care of their bodies now. It seems like everyone's playing a lot longer.
uh,
Uh,
uh, yeah, but hopefully he can appreciate what he's done, and
yeah.
But I guess all of Argentina cared very much about that, because I think I saw a clip and there was like, I think there was a couple, or maybe was it more than like 10 million people in Buenos Aires? Like, I think they had to get like a helicopter to lift the team out
Yeah,
during
I
the
heard
parade or something.
I heard something about that. Yeah.
Just like crazy. But okay. Any final thoughts as we close out this episode?
I mean, I liked it. It's a it's always, I feel like reading his books are always different, in that they're not really uplifting books. I guess they're usually a little somber, but overall it was very enjoyable. Easy read, I guess.
Mhm.
Quick. And yeah, good. How about yourself?
I would just say similar to Into Thin Air, like, yeah, I'm very intrigued in some of these characters, and I probably will spend some time on YouTube looking up some of these people to see if there's anything on them. Because I'm kind of curious what they like look like, and if there's any videos of them doing anything, or
Okay.
so
I mean, you should definitely, if you can find it, you should definitely go watch the movie.
okay, yeah, I will do that.
The
That'll be a
movie,
fun way to cap it off.
yeah, the movie was good. Uh,
So who does Kristen Stewart play in the movie?
so it was a very, they barely even talk about her in the book, but it was when he's at one of those trailer parks, sort of bumming around with the
Uh-huh.
people at the swap meet. They described a girl that was a little too young for him that just kind of followed him around.
Ah, was that in Arizona or something? That was,
Yeah,
yeah, okay.
yeah.
Okay, I remember that. Okay.
So she's very briefly in, I mean, very briefly in the movie.
Okay. Um, well, with that said, please reach out to us at brothersonbooks@gmail.com for any book recommendations, or if you'd like to be a guest host for a particular book you have in mind, a great review or rating on whichever platform you're listening to this would be greatly appreciated. If you can think of any friend, family member, or coworker that might like this episode, pass it along. And for the original episodes, the OGs, please visit brothersonbooks.com. I'm Jack Allweil, and with me, as always, is my brother Alex Allweil. Al, I will talk to you next time.
Bye, Jack.
Bye.